The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, is arguably the most beloved wrestler in the world, and when he finally got his big moment in the main event of AEW All In Wembley Stadium, defeating Swerve Strickland for the All Elite Wrestling World Championship, it was a culmination of years of hard work, a culmination of years of dedication, and a culmination of a story that we never thought would take this turn. Bryan Danielson is one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time, and in this video we're going to take a look at how this moment came to be, why it's so important, and why fans deserved to finally have this moment. I'm Omar Q for Wrestle Vibes. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. This is the triumph of the American Dragon. For anyone who's seen or spent time with the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, it's very easy to see why he's so loved in the manner that he is. Not only in the ring is he one of, if not the greatest performers of all time with technical prowess second to none, he also is genuinely one of the nicest individuals outside of the ring. Someone who his peers look up to, someone who Tony Khan said that if anything ever happened to him, if Tony Khan was ever indisposed, if Tony Khan was ever incapacitated, he told his father that AEW should be run by Bryan Danielson, because Bryan is someone he trusts, Bryan is someone he loves, and Bryan is someone he knows will put what's best for the entire locker room before what's best for Bryan Danielson. And in a business like professional wrestling, where attitudes and egos are always at the forefront, having a personality that is so nice, infectious, and is able to resonate with the crowd in the way that Bryan does is almost impossible. And that's why he's been able to cultivate this connection both among the fans and among his peers. And it's also a moment that wasn't supposed to happen. Back in 2016, Bryan Danielson, then known as Daniel Bryan in WWE, was forced to retire. And this is off the heels of one of the most epic runs we've ever seen, with the Yes Movement taking over in 2013 into 2014 and really pushing Bryan to the main event of WrestleMania 30. However, that run had fizzled out as Bryan had issues with his neck that led him to vacate that championship. And his eventual return in 2015 was very short-lived, as he would again suffer a concussion. And in 2016, when Bryan Danielson was indeed forced to retire, he did so in one of the most emotional segments in all of wrestling history, putting himself out there like he had never done before, and letting the fans know that when he was in between those ropes and when he was wrestling and performing for them, he felt like Superman. He felt like he was indestructible, and it was all because of the fans. And that professional wrestling had given him so much. It had given him the ability to make a living. It had given him the ability to entertain the masses, live out his dreams. But it had also introduced him to the love of his life. It had introduced him to the future mother of his children. And the ability to do that and having those experiences because of professional wrestling, and Bryan saying it in the way that he did, made that moment when he retired in 2016 genuinely one of the saddest moments that many wrestling fans who watched it live ever experienced. And that's why in 2018, when he made his return, it was the original triumph, we could say. It was a time where we didn't expect Bryan to come back. We had heard rumblings that maybe he would be able to do things outside of WWE because the WWE doctors would not clear him. But he was able to get cleared, and when that happened, that sadness from 2016 turned into unbridled jubilation, because fans had gotten Bryan Danielson back. Again, one of the most beloved guys ever. And everything that happened after that, in the fans' eyes, was extra. Little did we know how extra that would be, as in 2021 he would eventually go on to debut in AEW, where he would have his next great triumph, main eventing All In 2024 and beating Swerve Strickland for the All Elite Wrestling World Championship. A moment that every single person watching at home and every single person live in Wembley understood to be the moment that not just we deserved as fans, but a moment that Bryan deserved. After having his original title run following the main event of WrestleMania 30 ripped away from him because of injury, this was not a moment that fans wanted out of selfishness. This was a moment they wanted to give him. It was a moment that you could argue Tony Khan probably wanted to give him. And it's also a moment that the story called for. When Bryan Danielson announced his retirement last year, the character of Bryan Danielson took a turn. He went away from being this monster who was only worried about wrestling, almost like a wrestling machine, and he instead had turned into a guy who was almost saying his swan song, a guy who was just there to put on great matches, but you knew that the end was near, and it just seemed like he had been happy to be there. But it took Swerve Strickland in this story to bring out the American fucking dragon, as Bryan said. It took Swerve Strickland pushing Bryan to the limit. It took Swerve Strickland telling Bryan that at All In, it's not going to be you who decides that you retire. I am going to retire you. You are not going to take that away from me. And then calling out Bryan's children, calling out Birdie, calling out Buddy, calling out Bree, doing all those things and almost mocking them in the main event of All In as he beat down their father was something that brought out the inner anger that interrupted the zen of Bryan Danielson, someone who said that this is my last year and I'm going to be present, I'm going to enjoy it. And instead, we just got the guy who kicks people's effing heads in. We got the guy who is the best technical wrestler of all time. We got the guy who found a way to be aggressive in the ring. We found the guy who, after everything he had been through, knew that he had one great moment in him. And that is why, when he made Swerve tap out, you heard the adulation that you did from the crowd at Wembley. Fans had been waiting for Bryan to have this moment for 10 years. And just like they did in 2014, they manifested it again. And AEW delivered it in the best way possible, ensuring that Bryan, in front of his family, triumphs. And now we have the perfect version of the American Dragon. Someone who understands that his time may be running out, but someone who is still motivated to prove that he is the best wrestler in the world. And that's what makes the stories that are going to come next even more interesting, because we know we're going to get Bryan Danielson versus Darby Allin next month at AEW Grand Slam. We know that at All Out, Bryan Danielson will be facing Christian Cage. We know that in Tacoma, Washington, there's going to be Wrestle Dream, a pay-per-view that is in the hometown of the former champion, Swerve Strickland. A pay-per-view that is just an hour out of the hometown of the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson himself. The potential for story and epic matches know no bounds when it comes to this moment for AEW. And it's a moment that culminates arguably the best career that we have ever seen. And whether or not you think Bryan Danielson is indeed the greatest wrestler of all time, the fact remains that All In 2024 will go down as his greatest triumph, and something that fans finally, by God, finally, were able to see play out in a way that befits the American Dragon.